Wells. A small well of water is rendered impure if filth falls into it, such as urine, blood, or chicken droppings. What's a small amount of water? Again, we mentioned 10 cubits by 10 cubits. Anything less than that, if you've got a well with a tiny bit of water in it, only a few feet, and the well is so wide, it wouldn't suffice of that particular surface area, which would be 10 cubits by 10 cubits. This is true even if a small amount of filth falls in the well and no trace of it appears in the water. So in a small amount of water, that could be a bucket, it could be anything. If filth falls in, if it falls into a well with a tiny amount of water, then it renders it impure. How we deal with it, we'll mention as we go along in the lesson. The same ruling applies for a large amount of dung of camels, donkeys or cattle, as opposed to small amounts which are excused. Now, why would the dung of these animals be excused in a small amount but not a large amount? It makes sense why not a large amount, but a small amount, because in rural settings, when you look at a well may not necessarily be high bricked up. It's gonna sit flat and very low, and even if it's high, it's built quite high, right, like a foot or 2 or 3 off the ground. The rural setting where filth is present kind of everywhere and animals brush past it, you're going to sometimes get filth ending up inside the well, carried through wind or however, thrown in by the animals themselves, or however it may be. Ultimately, in a rural setting, the well will end up with some amount of filth in it. In a situation like that, if it's a small amount of filth, it's not taken into consideration. Now, you might ask, what is a small amount of filth? In these situations, farmers know best. They will tell you what a small amount of filth is from these particular animals, because when these animals do poop, they're this big. So a farmer will be able to tell you what a small amount is. A large amount is that which is considered large by the one who sees it in the well. So the following things do not render the well impure. Pigeon or sparrow droppings. Pigeons and sparrows, their filth is not impure. So if I got the filth on me, it's not impure. I could wipe it away and I'm clean. I would wash off, for hygienic reasons, I'd use soap and water and make sure it's gone. But if I didn't do that and I just got tissue and wiped it away and decided to pray, can I pray? Yes, because it's not considered impure. Pigeons and sparrows, their droppings are unavoidable. They fly through the sky, their droppings will fall upon you. In mosques, in the courtyards of mosques, they're walking around the courtyards of mosques and they leave their droppings. Even in the haram in Mecca, you'll see them everywhere. And no doubt, when those starlings that fly around the haram, they're going to drop their droppings on the floor of the mosque. There's no way of avoiding that. So the droppings of pigeons, sparrows and small birds, it's okay, it's not considered impure. Dead creatures that have no flowing blood in them, such as bugs, mosquitoes, wasps and scorpions. So again, dead insects, they don't really have what's known as blood, what we know as blood. They have some sort of a fluid, insect blood, which it oxygenates and everything, but it's different from what we know as blood. So their blood is not considered impure, and they don't really bleed anyway. They're self-contained. So dead creatures that have no flowing blood in them. So bugs, mosquitoes, wasps and scorpions. So any of those, and their juices, whatever tiny amount that comes out, is excused. Dead sea creatures. Sea creatures by default are pure. They don't really carry much blood in them anyway, if you want to call it blood. Right? Even a fish will not have a large amount of blood in it anyway. So it's considered pure. A dead fish is considered pure. A live creature, as long as there was no filth. So we're talking about these things falling into a well, right? So if there were fishes in the well and they were dead, they just happened to die, would that well be filthy? No. If you saw insects in that well, dead insects in that well, would that well be filthy? No. Pigeon and droppings, sparrow droppings in that well? No. A live creature, as long as there was no filth on its body, including humans, cattle, and animals. So if a live creature happens to jump into the well and then manages to climb out again, as long as there was no filth on its body, now animals always carry filth on their bodies. Right? But let's say, for example, this animal, it's been raining and it's clean, and this animal's clean. It happens to fall into a well. And when I say well, I'm talking about a body of water. It could be a watering hole for you, right? Or a well. If it falls in there and it comes back out, and if no filth is transferred from its body into the well, it's considered pure. Or if its saliva hasn't, depending on what animal it is. And we'll have a look at that. So if a dead animal falls into the well or a live animal dies in the well, then the legal ruling of how much water to remove is based on the size of which there are 3 categories. So what Imam Sharamurudi is talking about here is if you've got a dead animal that's fallen into the well, and now you've got to take that dead animal out. So you take that dead animal out, but obviously an animal lying in that well for a day or two, it's disgusting. You're gonna get some sort of filth exiting that animal and mixing with the water. In that instance, you've got to purify that well. It's impossible to drain the whole well out, right? So what do you do instead? There's 3 criteria. If it's a small animal, like a mouse, in which case it's wajib to remove just 20 buckets. So you take 20 buckets out, you've taken the means again, and now your well's pure. If it's a medium animal, so we're talking a pigeon, hamama, we're talking a pigeon, in which case it is wajib to remove 40 buckets. So a pigeon and above, 40 buckets of water. If a large animal, in which case it is wajib to remove all of the water. The same ruling applies if the animal was small or medium, right? So yet the carcass became bloated. So what he means here is if you've got a small animal, say I've got like a pigeon this big, and the pigeon disintegrated into the water. So now the filth has totally, it's the actual pigeon has this, parts of it are floating everywhere. So even if I were to now take the buckets out, I wouldn't be able to get all of the parts of the hamama out of the water. So in that instance, I'd have to take 200 buckets out. If it's not possible to remove the water, sometimes you can, and I think I saw this once when I was young, you can keep taking the water out, because the borehole, the sinkhole, the well goes down to the water table, right? Which kind of permeates, the water permeates from the rocks, the bedrock, and it collects, right? And it rises. If you take the water out fast enough, you literally take all of the water out before water has the sufficient amount of time to build up again. So you'd have ended up effectively cleaning the well out. But if you can't do that, what instances am I talking about? The water pressure is so much that no matter how many buckets you take out, it keeps filling, it keeps filling, it keeps filling. In that situation, you take out 200 buckets and that's considered sufficient. If the saliva of the animal touches the water, then all the water must be removed if the saliva was filthy or doubtful. If it was pure yet disliked, then it is merely recommended to remove the water. Let's have a look at what this is. So, types of saliva. Pure and purifying, yet not disliked. This is the saliva of a human being, even if it's in a state of major ritual impurity or a non-Muslim, as long as his mouth was clean. So, a Muslim or a non-Muslim in a state of major ritual impurity or not, his saliva is pure and purifying. So, if somebody drank this, whether he was pure or not, Muslim or not, I could then drink from this, alhamdulillah, because a human being is considered pure. If there was no filth in his mouth, so what are we talking about here? We'd be talking about alcohol. If somebody took a swig of whiskey and then his very next gulp would be this, then the filth is going to transfer. But if there's no filth, then I can drink his leftover water. Filthy. This water may not be used for purification in any case, nor may be drunk unless one is dying of thirst, similar to the permissibility of eating meat of an animal not ritually slaughtered if one is dying of hunger. This category includes the saliva of dogs, pigs, and wild animals such as lions, wolves, hyenas, apes, and the like. So these particular animals, they're filthy, they're heavy filth. Their saliva is considered heavy filth. So I'm not allowed to use that unless there is a dire need, such as the same excuse you have if you're dying of hunger, then you can eat a pig or one of those haram animals. And then obviously when you have the ability to, you no longer do it. This is the same situation here. Disliked if pure water is available. This includes the saliva of a house cat, released chicken, predatory birds such as eagles or falcons, and creatures that roam around houses like mice and snakes. If no other water is available, it is not disliked to use this water for purification. Now you're thinking mice and snakes. How could the water be pure? How could I be allowed to use that? How could it just be disliked? Because it's impossible to curb mice in your house, right? Mice get everywhere. Mice get everywhere, take drinks from everywhere. That's why we cover our vessels. And it's almost impossible. The fight against mice and rodents in your house is a losing battle. You can never win. So that's the reason why we don't look at it in the same regard. And the same with snakes and everything. Snakes, you won't even realize if a snake has come and drunk from a vessel. And predatory birds and the like, and released chickens. Why a released chicken? It's because a released chicken, you don't know what it's eating. It's out. It forages and it eats all sorts of things, and then it comes back. Doubtful saliva with regards to its purifying nature. This is the saliva of mules and donkeys. It's doubtful about the nature of mules and donkeys. In this instance, if no water is available, one makes wudu with this water, followed by tayammum, and then prays. So if you've got a trough of water or a well and it's been drunk in by a mule or a donkey and the saliva is transferred, then it's known as doubtful. In this situation, you'd make the wudu and then you'd also make tayammum on top of that, and then you'd pray. Thank you very much. That's all for today. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.